listening to the Actionable Marketing Podcast, powered by CoSchedule, the only way to organize your marketing in one place, helping marketers stay focused, deliver projects on time, and keep their entire marketing team happy.
There's an old saying you've probably heard that failing to plan is planning to fail. And when it comes to content marketing, that phrase definitely holds true. But content planning isn't easy, and nor is it always properly valued. And as such, it's something that sometimes gets overlooked. So to explain why content planning matters and how to plan content consistently with a repeatable and effective framework, I spoke with Vassilena Valchanova, who has put together an excellent blueprint for content planning that she was generous enough to share on this episode. This was a great conversation, and I'm certain you'll pick up a ton of insights that you can use, even if you consider yourself a master at content planning. Now, here's Vassilena. Hey, Vassilena, how's it going today?
Hey, it's great to be here and to be part of the show. I'm very excited to share more about content marketing with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just starting my day here in North Dakota. It sounds like you're just wrapping up your day in Bulgaria. So I'm glad that we're able to fit this into our respective schedules, really on opposite sides of the planet. So what we're going to be talking about is content marketing planning and your blueprint specifically for content planning. But before we get too far along, the first question I have for you: why do marketers tend to struggle with content planning? Like, what is it about planning that so many of us tend to find difficult?
Well, frankly, I think the main issue I've personally had when planning content and doing any kind of social media scheduling as well is to just, focus on the right things and make sure that I'm following some structure that's been predefined. Because oftentimes, if left to our own devices, content planning falls by the wayside and we don't spend enough time to properly plan out what messages we'll be sharing, what different types of content we'll be promoting, how we'll engage our audience in the different channels and in different formats. So the main issue usually is just keeping that focus and dedicating the time to that and finding a really efficient way to actually plan content out in the long run.
Yeah, for sure. So what are some of the negative impacts that marketers can expect to face if they lack a clear process for planning content?
Well, in my experience, what usually happens is that, a marketer or a social media manager would wake up one morning and be like, oh, bleep, I haven't posted for a while now. I don't have anything ready. And they will just struggle to find something quickly to fill that gap, to be present again in the newsfeed of their audience. And what this leads to is that we tend to go for the low-hanging fruit, which is more often than not some form of promotional content. So it would be something like, check out our new product, here's our latest promotional campaign, or whatever. So what this leads to is that, first off, we start creating content that's pretty much feels and looks the same, because we're trying to push something out quicker, and we'll go for, just an image with a standardized template design rather than, focusing on really creating something unique at that point. And we'll also not cover all the different audiences that we're trying to reach and all the different content goals that we might have across all the channels that we're using. Because as we all know, the end goal is to not just promote products, but also engage, ask questions, provide inspiration, give people helpful information. And those other formats that are not the brand talking about itself, they're more difficult to create and they require additional planning.
Yeah, absolutely. So what led you to create your own content marketing blueprint, like your own framework for ensuring that you have a repeatable process for content planning in order to avoid those kinds of problems?
If I can start with a joke here, my family name in our language, it's derived from the word of wolf. And we have this saying that the wolf is strong because it does its own work. So it works on all the problems by its own and doesn't rely on anyone else. So this was essentially why I came to that as well. It was due to sheer necessity of finding a way where I can plan content quicker, especially with the clients I've been working with over the past 3 years as a freelancer. Prior to that, I was part of internal marketing teams, and there the issue wasn't that apparent because I was almost always I would be the person who's doing the planning on their own, and I would essentially try to keep all this information in my head. I didn't know it at the time, but this is obviously not the best way to do things. And when I started working with clients, I was working for a format that would allow us to have this single source of truth, this blueprint that we can return to again and again whenever we are not necessarily sure what we're trying to do, if we forget where the focus point needs to be with a specific channel or a specific audience that we're trying to attract. And it would serve as a long-term reminder, a clear strategy document that would help in the day-to-day planning. And over time, I've done a bunch of different iterations of this process. And what I arrived to in the end was this really quick and dirty way of documenting all of this information in a single file that you can print and leave on your desk and just glance back at whenever you're planning content. Because even though we're in this as marketers, we're in this planning process day in and day out, it's very easy to forget some of the more minor details, or to just be so down into the trenches and fighting to push that content day in and day out that you simply feel a bit farther from the initial plan and the initial goals you had set at the beginning.
Yeah, certainly. So can you describe at a high level, how does your blueprint or your process work from start to finish? Like what are the steps that you've mapped out?
So a very, very big caveat that I want to start with is that the content blueprint is a representation of the strategy, but it's not, building the strategy. You need to have the strategy already outlined, and that usually entails all sorts of different preliminary research, competitor audits, and so on and so forth. So I won't get into those details. You've had a lot of wonderful guests who talk about that part of the whole strategic building purpose before. What the content blueprint does is to allow you to document that strategy in an easy to use format. And the way we do that is go from looking at the big picture. So we start with the content mission statement of the brand, and then get all the way down to the different editorial goals that we'd have, the different channels that we'll be using to reach those goals, and then the different key topics that the brand needs to cover in their day-to-day content. So these are sort of like the 4 different segments would be the mission statement, setting up the goals, channel plan, and a topic plan.
Sure. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And that's a pretty clear orderly framework to follow. So the last question I'll throw your way: if listeners want to apply this process or a similar process to their own content planning, how would you recommend they begin?
So I'm gonna just dive a little deeper into each of those four sections I mentioned earlier, and I think this would basically go through like the nitty-gritty details of putting this together. So the first element I mentioned, the content mission statement, this will essentially serve as our like one-liner that describes everything we're trying to do with the content strategy and everything we need to keep in mind with our content planning. So for the content mission statement, I really like to use Andy Crestodina from Orbit Media. He has this really nice, very, very short framework for setting up your content mission statement, which is our content where audience X gets information Y that offers benefit Z. So you need to cover those three elements. What's the audience you're serving? What information are you giving them? So when I say information, I mean the different types of content you're providing. And what's the benefit that people will get out of consuming that content? So if I can give you a quick example with my own goal for my own blog, my mission statement reads like this. Vassi's blog provides marketers, founders, and business owners, so that's the audience I'm targeting, with actionable advice, practical tools, and a healthy dose of inspiration. So those are my three content pillars that helps them become better digital professionals and enable company growth. So what I'm trying to do is whenever I'm sharing content, this needs to directly or indirectly help digital professionals achieve company growth. This is a very simple sort of way of putting things together, but it's a very nice reminder when you're sitting down and, especially like, sitting down and planning your month's worth of content to get back to that mission statement and to really use it almost as a litmus test to analyze, am I actually doing the job? Am I really creating this type of content? Is my content really doing the job of bringing those benefits to my target audience? The second section I mentioned, that's the goals and marketing metrics. So we're going to define the different editorial goals. What's the business goal that content marketing is trying to help with? And I've done this. I've organized this information into a really simple, like 3-step process. It's what's the name of your editorial goal? What does that goal look like? And what are the metrics to follow? I think the name of the goal and the metrics are pretty clear to most marketers. What I want to point out is that this section, like what does this look like? It turns out that it's very helpful to a lot of my clients to make sure that they're aligning their whole team and they're helping even people who are not part of the daily content planning to really understand what we mean by awareness building. What do we mean by engaging an audience? And this really helps to, bring that marketing jargon that we'd oftentimes just use without thinking about it into specific terms that speak to everyone within the team, to everyone in the company. Then the next element here would be the channel plan, and this is actually the biggest portion of the content blueprint that you'd have. So here you'd lay out really the nitty-gritty details around like what channels you're using, what the types of content, what are the types of content you'll be creating in each of those channels. How often are you posting? So what's your velocity? What are the formats that you're using? And so on and so forth. And this is often, I would see that with a lot of clients when we're talking the details around like planning a few different channels, because most brands usually have at least 4 or 5 different channels that they're using. So you would have a couple of social media accounts. You would have some form of email communication, and then you would have like a blog or a website or some place where you're posting more long form content. And keeping in mind how those channels play together, that's very difficult without having a clear visual representation of that information. So in this session, you would clearly see, okay, we're posting on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We're working with our target audience A and target audience B on Twitter. We're working with that same target audience B on Facebook as well. And we're using LinkedIn to reach a completely different audience C. And you can easily see where you have those points where you're having a customer touch point with the same person across different channels, or where you're using a channel to reach a completely new audience. And then again, the same thing applies for, let's say, the topics you'll be covering and the formats you'll be using for each channel. It's very easy to see, am I repurposing content across those 3 different channels? Is there a unique format that I want to create in, let's say, Instagram that's not applicable anywhere else? And then you would obviously, depending on your availability and the amount of work you can put into creating content, you can make that decision, which is, okay, do I really need this unique format to work in this channel or not? Do I really want to create, let's say, short story formats, Instagram videos as a sort of my key long form pillar content on Instagram? Or is this channel just a supporting channel where I don't necessarily want to put too much effort into that, and so on and so forth? So it's easy to compare and contrast those different channels, how they play together. And what are the different types of content you'll be planning, going back to content planning too. What are the different content pieces you'll be planning across those different channels? And then the last section, which I mentioned, is the topic plan. So this is an area where you're gonna, if in the channel plan you've said, where am I creating content and what different formats am I using in these different channels? The topic plan is more focused on what am I trying to say across all of these different channels, or at least in the channels that are key for my brand. And how am I gonna almost marry this content topic with the key messages that I want to promote as a brand. So again, just to bring this into concrete terms, if we're talking about content planning as a key focus area for my personal content on my blog, I'm trying to convey the core idea that the long-term content success does not rely just on like quick hacks or tricks, but on understanding the reader's needs and really serving those needs in a consistent manner in the long run. So this is a core idea that I try to cover in different pieces on my blog, in the editorial section of my newsletter, in different social media channels and so on. So this is a point I bring back people to again and again in a long period of time, just to make sure that I'm really bringing this point home, and that I'm then tying that core idea to my brand and the services that I'm providing, because that's obviously like where people would come and commission me to build a content plan for them. Actually, this last idea of the topic plan, this is something I was inspired to include from a blog post from Animals. They're one of the most popular content marketing agencies, and they have this idea of author theory, which is, for example, if you watch a Wes Anderson movie, you immediately know this is a Wes Anderson movie because the style and the general ideas that he covers, these are coming up again and again. And getting that getting that repetition in is not necessarily a bad point. It's actually something that can create your unique style.
Yeah, for sure. And I, first off, thank you for offering such a thorough and detailed breakdown of how your blueprint works. I think that sounds very actionable, very clear. And if anyone had any questions at all on how to plan, a content marketing or how to plan content, from start to finish, I think you've pretty well covered it. But I really like the way you ended that with that Wes Anderson analogy. Because anybody who's familiar with Wes Anderson's films knows exactly what you're talking about. His movies are, you would not mistake one of his movies for anybody else's. And that's extremely powerful, right? Like if you apply that concept, to a brand, like if people can know that something is yours before they maybe even hear a word of audio or read a line of dialogue or copy, that can be super powerful just for building brand awareness, recognition, and all of those other things.
Yeah, definitely. And again, if I have to quote someone, I frankly don't remember who said it first, but it was something along the lines of, if you have like your own brand style, if quote unquote, if the label comes off, so if I look at your blog post without seeing the title and the logo on the page, will I know it's yours? Mm-hmm. And this is these finer details. Actually, I think that's bringing it back to content planning. I think that once you have a clear idea of what you want to do in the long run, and sort of you have this clear, so you're not spending any more mental energy on focusing on that day in and day out, because you have this robust reminder of what you're trying to achieve and how and why. Then you can really focus as a marketer on building those finer details, building those things that really set up a brand apart from everyone else. It's not just about like posting on a regular basis. It's about like what you're creating as types of content or as pieces that will really resonate with your own audience. And that only happens when your mind's clear from the minutiae around creating your day-to-day pieces,
Yeah, for sure. You're not going to make a masterpiece just off the cuff, just relying on your own creative genius without any kind of a plan or process. So, well, this has been fantastic. Before I let you go, I understand that you have, you actually share your content marketing planning blueprint. I believe it's on your blog. Would you mind sharing with our listeners where they can go find that if they're interested?
Of course, happy to do that. So I've actually created a short link that will point them exactly to the blog post that covers the blueprint in more detail and where they can download the template. It's on my website, which is valchanova.me. So VALCHANOVA.me/co-schedule. So that's easy to remember, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much once again for coming on the show. I know this is going to be super helpful for our audience.
Glad to be here, and I hope it's helpful as well. If some of your listeners want to provide any feedback on that and let me know how they're using it in the long run, I'd be happy to talk some more.
Thanks once again to Vassilena for coming on the show and for sharing all of her insights. And just so our regular listeners know, this will actually be the last episode of this show that I will be recording as the host of the Actionable Marketing Podcast. Next week, you'll be hearing from the original host of this show and our head of marketing here at CoSchedule, Nathan Ellering. The reason for the departure is actually because I will be moving on to a new role with a new company. And for those who might happen to follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter, you'll see more updates about that, and you'll probably see those updates well before this episode gets published. So with that, thanks so much to all of our loyal listeners who stick with us week in and week out. The show will be in good hands with Nathan, and so I'm certain that this show is not going to skip a beat. If we are fortunate enough to be a show that you really make a part of your routine week to week. So with that, thanks once more to Vassilena. Thanks to you for listening, and this has been it for me. Thanks so much for sticking with us and making the last couple of years as the host of this show as much fun as they have been. Take care.
You've been listening to the Actionable Marketing Podcast from your friends at CoSchedule. For more actionable content, visit coschedule.com.